You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
Cyber threats are evolving every second, and staying ahead is more than just a challenge, it's a necessity. That's why we're thrilled to partner with ThreatLocker, the cybersecurity solution trusted by businesses worldwide. ThreatLocker is a full suite of solutions designed to give you total control, stopping unauthorized applications, securing sensitive data, and ensuring your organization runs smoothly and securely. Visit threatlocker.com today to see how a default deny approach can keep your company safe and compliant.
Today is January 17th, 2025. I'm Maria Varmazis, and this is T-Minus.
T-Minus. 20 seconds to LOS T-Dress. Go for deploy. Roger roll.
U.S. President Biden signs an executive order on strengthening cybersecurity to include the federal space sector.
4.
NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab will open next week to any personnel who need to be at the facility following the devastating LA fires.
3.
The U.S. National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency announces its vendors for the $200 million Luno B commercial data contract.
2.
China launches a satellite for Pakistan.
1.
Starship experiences a rapid, unscheduled disassembly during its 7th test flight.
0.
Our partners at NSF will be sharing the weekly space traffic report later in the show, bringing us the highlights from all of the incredible launches that we've seen this week. Can you say chopstick catch? And taking a look at what's to come in the next 7 days. Happy Friday, everybody. I'm sure that you, like me, were glued to your screen yesterday during the 7th test flight of SpaceX's Starship rocket. What a start for the newly upgraded Super Heavy rocket. It was a truly gorgeous launch, followed by a breathtaking catch by the Mechazilla, only for that joy to be quickly dashed when we saw the spacecraft, well, go dark for quite a while and then later find out that it experienced a rapid, unscheduled disassembly, as SpaceX often likes to say. The 171-foot-tall Starship broke apart over the Atlantic Ocean roughly 8.5 minutes after liftoff. It was an epic explosion that created streaks of debris that was captured by observers across the Caribbean. Though it's too early to definitively explain what went wrong, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk shared the following statement on his social media platform X. Preliminary indication is that we had an oxygen fuel leak in the cavity above the ship engine firewall that was large enough to build pressure in excess of the vent capacity. Apart from obviously double-checking for leaks, we will add fire suppression to that volume and probably increase vent area. Nothing so far suggests pushing next launch past next month. Here's what was recorded at the time of the event by air traffic controllers in the Caribbean.
Oh, it's got a major streak going from at least 60 miles with all these different colors. Just curious, it looked like it was coming towards us, but obviously because of the distance, just letting you know.
Can you give an estimate on how far away it is?
Now at 200, it looks like it's beyond at least 200 miles from Earth, but it's pretty high in the atmosphere. Yeah, when we get closer, we can let you know.
Starlink. Is no longer falling, or is it still airborne?
No longer falling. We can still see like a red shade right there, but it's already on the ocean.
Already in the ocean. Thanks a lot. Let me know if you do see any more that are airborne.
The space vehicle may have possible debris falling into the National Airspace System for approximately. Let's say about 1 second. space vehicle mishap, a debris response area has been activated. Beginning south of Georgetown, Great Exuma, extending to the southeast, impacting Providenciales, Drenthurk areas, extending further beyond and ending at the San Juan and Piarco FIA boundary, just north of St. Martin. Stand by for individual instructions.
Although the debris mostly seemed to have fallen in the designated fallout zone, the FAA told media that it briefly slowed and diverted aircraft around the area where space vehicle debris was falling in an abundance of caution. Let's hope they can recover that debris quickly and learn from the mishap. SpaceX is expected to run regular test flights this year to ready Starship for their planned Mars mission in 2026. On to our next story now, moving over to China. And China launched a Long March 2D carrier rocket from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in northwest China earlier today. The rocket carried 3 satellites, including one for Pakistan. The PRS-C-E01 satellite aims to boost Pakistan's ability to monitor and manage natural resources, respond to disasters, and improve urban planning and agricultural development. The satellite uses electro-optical sensors to collect data and images of the Earth's surface by detecting and measuring reflected sunlight or emitted radiation. The Long March 2D rocket also carried 2 other satellites, the Tianlu-1 and Blue Carbon-1. The China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation says the Tianlu-1 is an atmospheric sounding satellite developed by China's private satellite manufacturer Galaxy Space. The Blue Carbon-1, also known as the Lantan-1, was developed by Geospace for Hangzhou Jianzi University. The U.S. National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency has selected the vendors for the $200 million Luno B commercial data indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contract. The 13 vendors, which include Black Sky, Maxar, and Planet Labs, will provide the national security community with timely access to high-quality commercial geospatial intelligence, also known as GeoInt. The Luno B contract will enable NGA to lead the GeoInt enterprise in applying, yet again, GeoInt artificial intelligence, while delivering decision advantage to warfighters, policymakers, and mission partners. GeoInt users will have access to data and analytic services that add new context to analytic assessments by characterizing worldwide economic, environmental, and geopolitical activities, as well as illegal, unregulated, and unreported activities. Luno B has a 5-year base ordering period with a $200 million ceiling. Vendors will compete on a full and open basis for future delivery orders. Moving over to NASA news now, and Laurie Leshin, director of NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, took to social media to provide an update on the JPL facility following the devastating LA fires. JPL will be open next week to any personnel who need to be at the lab. However, to enable full cleanup and repair of minor wind damage, NASA leadership is strongly encouraging telework next week for those who are able to do so. Laurie reminded everyone that JPL has been operational even during the fire threat. The lab is still flying more than 40 missions through the Deep Space Network and preparing for 3 launches in the next 3 months. Although thankfully the lab escaped fire damage, the team that worked there have been personally impacted by the fires. More than 200 employees have lost everything, and many others will have long-term impacts. And for our last story, you may have missed it in the flurry of announcements about last-minute executive orders from the outgoing Biden administration, but something space-related was in yesterday's executive order on strengthening and promoting innovation in the nation's cybersecurity. Section 3, subsection E, has the bulk of what might interest you. Essentially, it's a rally to shore up space cybersecurity measures, especially for space systems owned by the U.S. government. Stands to reason. Here's what it says in part. In light of the pivotal role space systems play in global critical infrastructure and communications resilience, and to further protect space systems and the supporting digital infrastructure vital to our national security, including our economic security, agencies shall take steps to continually verify that federal space systems have the requisite cybersecurity capabilities through actions including continuous assessments, testing, exercises, and modeling and simulation. Civil space gets a special call-out in that section to make sure that spacecraft, data in transit, and ground stations all become more resilient to outside monitoring or interference. And that concludes our Friday Intel briefing for you. We hope you'll have a wonderful weekend, everybody. We've added 3 additional stories to our show notes for you to read today. One's on reports that the director of the Space Development Agency is under investigation. Another on General Raymond's appointment to Planet's board of directors. And the third is a U.S. Space Force contract announcement for Govini. Hey, T-Minus crew, tune in tomorrow for T-Minus Deep Space. It's our show for extended interviews, special editions, and deep dives with some of the most influential professionals in the space industry. And tomorrow we have Giacomo Gatto and Joy Fana talking about how space is used in everyday businesses and how AWS for Aerospace and Satellite is assisting. Check it out while you're heading out of town for the long holiday weekend, catching up on the exercise that you vowed to do with your New Year's resolution, or just staying home to catch up on rest and relaxation. You've earned it.
And now, a word from our sponsor, the University of Alabama in Huntsville College of Business. The Business of Space Conference is your chance to connect with leaders shaping the new space economy. Held February 23rd through the 25th at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, this year's theme, Creating Solutions with Partnerships, highlights the power of collaboration to address challenges and unlock opportunities. Don't miss this opportunity to drive innovation and shape policies. Early bird rates end January 24th. Learn more at opce.uah.edu/Business of Space.
It has been an incredible week in space launch, to say the least. And our partners at nasaspaceflight.com have the full space traffic report for you now.
I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and this is your weekly space traffic report for T-Minus Space. Starting off the week, we had the launch of a Zhelong 3 out of China. Liftoff took place on January 13th at 3 o'clock UTC from the Dongfeng-Heng Tiangong barge off the coast of Haiyang. The rocket was carrying 10 Centispace 1 satellites into low Earth orbit. These satellites are Global Navigation Satellite System Augmentation Signal satellites from Chinese company Future Navigation. This batch of satellites is the second being launched to support this constellation, which is planned to include up to 160 satellites. And speaking of satellite constellations, the next launch we had was none other than a Starlink launch from SpaceX. The mission started on January 13th at 1647 UTC from Space Launch Complex 40, and it was carrying 8 Starlink V2 Mini and 13 Starlink direct-to-cell satellites to low Earth orbit. The first stage supporting this mission, B-1080, was flying for the 15th time, and it successfully landed on SpaceX's drone ship, a Shortfall of Gravitas. Just about a day after that, we had another Falcon 9 launch, but this time as part of SpaceX's Transporter 12 mission. Liftoff took place on January 14th at 1909 from Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg. Falcon 9 was carrying 131 different payloads into sun-synchronous orbit. Transporter 12 is the company's latest launch as part of its small-sat rideshare program, the 14th overall and the 12th of the Transporter-type missions. These small-sat rideshare missions are regular launches that carry multiple small payloads all bundled together in the same Falcon 9 for a lower price than a dedicated ride to orbit. In the case of the Transporter missions, they go into sun-synchronous orbit as compared to the bandwagon missions, which are also part of this program, but go to mid-inclination low Earth orbits. This particular mission carried 131 payloads to orbit, and of course, if we went through every single payload, we'd need an hour-long episode. But don't fret, because you can check out a full rundown of these payloads at NSF's news site, courtesy of our writer, Danny Lentz. For this mission, SpaceX used a very young booster, B-1088. This was only its second flight, and it made an epic return to launch site landing at Landing Zone 4, just a few hundred meters away from the launch mount. We also had another Falcon 9 launch a few hours later, but this one was moonbound. The mission started on January 15th at 6:11 UTC from Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The Falcon 9 was carrying 2 lunar landers on their way to the moon. The 2 lunar landers in question were Firefly's first Blue Ghost lander and iSpace's second Hakuto R lander. Firefly's Blue Ghost was flying as part of NASA's Commercial Lunar Payload Services contract, flying a number of payloads for the agency to the moon, as well as some other commercial ones. This is the third mission overall for that program after Astrobotic's Peregrine lander and Intuitive Machines' Nova C lander, which both flew last year. Falcon deployed Blue Ghost into low Earth orbit, where it will spend 25 days. Firefly later confirmed that the lander was doing well and that it had completed on-orbit commissioning. On March 2nd, Blue Ghost will complete its journey to the moon and attempt to land on the lunar surface near Mons-La-Trielle in the Mare Crisium volcanic basin. If all goes well, the lander is set to operate its 10 science payloads on the moon for one lunar day. After Falcon 9 released Blue Ghost, it fired its upper stage engine once more to reach the deployment trajectory for Hokuto R. This trajectory takes the lander to the moon in about 4 to 5 months, where it's set to land near the center of Mare Frigoris. This will be iSpace's second attempt to land on the lunar surface after a software issue caused the first Hokuto R mission to crash into the moon in 2023. The lander for the second attempt carries a tiny rover, 3 science experiments, a commemorative plate, and an art piece. Of course, we'll cover both landings in more detail in a future episode. We wish Firefly and iSpace the best of luck with their landing attempts. Now, all that said, we already know for sure that one thing from this mission landed successfully, and that was, of course, Falcon 9's booster B-1085, which flew for its 5th time and touched down on the deck of drone ship Just Read the Instructions. Now, if a double mission to the moon wasn't big enough, 2 huge rockets also launched this week. The first was Blue Origin's New Glenn, which finally lifted off for its long-anticipated inaugural flight. After a scrub earlier in the week, New Glenn lifted off from Cape Canaveral on January 16th at 7:03 UTC and slowly crawled into the sky atop a pillar of blue flames. The ride up was uneventful. The rocket stages separated successfully, the second stage performed both of its burns without issue, and New Glenn delivered its Blue Ring Pathfinder payload into its target orbit. Blue Ring is a space tug and satellite bus developed by Blue Origin itself, and New Glenn's first flight presented a perfect opportunity for some testing. Unfortunately, the secondary mission of trying to land and recover the booster didn't go as smoothly. The booster's entry burn didn't slow down the booster as much as it should have, and it was subsequently lost. That is, of course, sad, but it wasn't the main objective for this mission, which was just to reach orbit. Blue Origin managed to do that on its very first attempt, and thus, mission complete. We also had a spacewalk on the ISS this week. This extravehicular activity, or EVA, was performed by NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Sunny Williams. Yes, one of the Starliner astronauts. The duo stepped outside of the station on January 16th for a spacewalk that lasted exactly 6 hours, starting at 13:01 Universal Time. The astronauts performed several tasks during the EVA, including conducting repairs on the NICER X-ray telescope. NICER is short for Neutron Star Interior Composition Explorer. The telescope's thermal shields had been damaged, letting light into places where it isn't supposed to be. Nick Hague patched the holes so that the telescope can resume daytime operations. Meanwhile, Sunny replaced a reflector on the international docking adapter that her ride home, Crew Dragon Freedom, is currently attached to. The astronauts also did some preparations for future maintenance on the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer experiment and replaced a rate gyro assembly, which the station uses to determine its orientation. And then it was time for the second big rocket launch, the 7th flight of SpaceX's Starship. Booster 14 and Ship 33 lifted off from Starbase on January 16th at 22:37 Universal Time. The booster performed flawlessly on the way up, and after hot staging, the booster and ship went their own separate ways. The booster performed its boost back burn to return to the launch site. While it didn't ignite all the engines that it was supposed to, it was good enough for SpaceX to commit to a catch attempt. And that worked out perfectly. The Super Heavy booster softly touched down on the launch tower's chopsticks. After that, all eyes were on Ship 33 as it was a new version of Starship. Unfortunately, things went awry quickly after the booster's successful landing. The ship appeared to lose more and more engines, and telemetry stopped. The ship eventually broke up on re-entry downrange, and Elon Musk later reported on X that there may have been an oxygen/fuel leak in the ship's engine section, which ultimately caused its demise. Closing out the week, a Changzheng 2D launched from China on January 17th. This launch was conducted from the Zhochuan Satellite Launch Center. As is common for Chinese launches, no details about the payload were released before the flight, so we don't know much about it at the moment. Going into next week, we'll have a Starlink launch on January 18th. Lifting off from California, Falcon 9 will deliver 27 Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. T0 is set during a 4-hour window starting at 15:57 Universal Time. Another Starlink launch is scheduled for January 21st. This will be the first launch of Starlink Group 13. This mission will be conducted from Launch Complex 39A in Florida, and the 4-hour launch window opens at 5:13 UTC. Back in California, we'll have the third Starlink launch of the week on January 22nd. Liftoff is expected during a 4-hour window opening at 14:38 UTC. There will be another spacewalk next week on January 23rd, starting at 13:15 Universal Time, and this EVA will be conducted by NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams. NASA's really putting the Starliner astronauts to work while they're up there. They'll remove a radio antenna from the station's truss, prepare a spare part for the Canadarm in case it ever needs a joint replaced, and collect some samples from the station's exterior to test whether any microorganisms have decided to call it home. And wrapping up the week on January 24th, we'll have, you guessed it, another Starlink launch from Florida. The 4-hour window for this launch opens at 22:45 Universal Time. I'm Alicia Siegel for NSF, and that's your weekly space traffic report. Now back to T-Minus Space.
We'll be right back.
And now, a message from our sponsor, Zscaler, the leader in cloud security. Enterprises have spent billions of dollars on firewalls and VPNs, yet breaches continue to rise by an 18% year-over-year increase in ransomware attacks and a $75 million record payout in 2024. These traditional security tools expand your attack surface with public-facing IPs that are exploited by bad actors more easily than ever with AI tools. It's time to rethink your security. Zscaler Zero Trust plus AI stops attackers by hiding your attack surface, making apps and IPs invisible, eliminating lateral movement, connecting users only to specific apps, not the entire network, continuously verifying every request based on identity and context, simplifying security management with AI-powered automation, and detecting threats using AI to analyze over 500 billion daily transactions. Hackers can't attack what they can't see. Protect your organization with Zscaler Zero Trust and AI. Learn more at zscaler.com/security.
Welcome back. There are a bunch of special deliveries heading to the moon right now, both on Firefly's Blue Ghost and iSpace's Resilience. Both lunar landers have a number of payloads aboard, mostly scientific, of course, but some things are also for fun. Imagine. Now that both landers are en route to the moon, we're learning more about those fun payloads, and one of them is the moon's very own copy of, you ready for this? The United States Constitution. Yes, a digital copy of the United States' foundational document will be on the moon pretty soon, thanks to the team at Copernic Space. And next time there is a lander heading to the moon, later this year in fact, Copernic will be working with SpaceBit to send a physical copy of the U.S. Constitution. So, moon, buckle up. You've got some reading to do. I wonder if the digital version is a PDF or something, plain text file, I would hope. Still, what operating system does the moon have? Anyway, the physical copy will help if the digital version can't be opened, right? And if something about this story feels somehow familiar in a, didn't someone do something like this recently? You would be right. Last year, when Intuitive Machines' Odysseus had its successful soft landing on the moon, Lone Star Data Holdings, who we've interviewed, in fact, tested Earth-to-Moon data transmission and storage by sending the U.S. Declaration of Independence to the moon, the lander on it, that is, and then as a confirmation of receipt, the moon, the lander on the moon, sent back to the Earth a copy of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So, in fact, since that mission last February, the moon is down a copy of the U.S. Constitution, having sent it back to us. So it's kind of nice of Copernic to replenish its supply. That's it for T-Minus for January 17th, 2025, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. If you like this show, please share a rating and review in your podcast app. Also, please fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to space@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Alice Caruth. Our associate producer is Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karp. Simone Petrella is our president, Peter Kilby is our publisher, and I am your host, Maria Varmazis. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful long weekend. We'll be back with our daily intelligence briefings on Tuesday.
T-Minus.
Hey everybody, Dave here. Have you ever wondered where your personal information is lurking online? Like many of you, I was concerned about my data being sold by data brokers. So I decided to try Delete Me. I have to say, Delete Me is a game changer. Within days of signing up, they started removing my personal information from hundreds of data brokers. I finally have peace of mind knowing my data privacy is protected. Delete Me's team does all the work for you with detailed reports, so you know exactly what's been done. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/N2K and use promo code N2K at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/N2K and enter code N2K at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/N2K, code N2K.